situation in Jagersfontein. We're joined in studio now by the Jagersfontein Development spokesperson, Billy Bilankulu, as well as the Kopanong municipality mayor, Xolani Tseletsele. Billy, let's begin with you. Good to have you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
So, I mean, picture that is being painted there certainly is one of a reconstruction that has not fully taken off the ground. 160 houses were damaged, lives were lost, individuals were misplaced, livestock was lost. Is there a semblance of a reconstruction?
Yes, there is. I think, like the fellow that was there on screen saying, that there is a construction that has started. I think we need to go back to where everything started. We responded to a disaster, and we came together collectively as the community, government, as well as Jagersfontein Development. None of us knew how to respond to it. None of us understood what then becomes the best approach. And I think a few months down the line, government and ourselves realized that some of the decisions that were taken during the disaster, in a long run, do affect the actual plan to rehabilitate or rebuild the community and their lives and their livelihood. So we have been issued with a lot of directives, I think about 14 to be specific, from government. And I think those directives were meant to protect the community and also to ensure that everyone that is affected remains in a safe environment and be able to rebuild their lives. But at the same time, those directives also limited us as the mine. You call us a mine, we're not really a mine, we are a processing facility. And I'll refer ourselves as the mine because everyone calls us a mine. To then start immediately with the intervention of rebuilding. Yeah. I'll give you an example. One of the directives said no construction should be done in the mainstream where the actual disaster happened. Yeah. Two, we engage with government and say, in the absence of us being able to build or rebuild the houses in the mainstream, what then should happen? We engaged with the mayor, we engaged with human settlement to try and find an alternative land that will be able to be used to rebuild the houses. But that option had two implications. One, the financial implication in terms of then now having to find bulk services because Kopanong or Jagersfontein itself don't have available land that has got services. I think that attempt to find land and budget for it failed from all ends. That is when we then decided to say, let's engage or rather wait for a report from DWS that can be able to allow people to move back. Basically, that report was to guide us. If that report came out, one report was the toxicology report, which spoke of the health impact on the environment and so forth. But it came forth and said the area that the people were living in still safe for them to live. In a sense, the toxicology report suggests that everything that you see from the sludge, it's a mere colorful mud. Because we are a mining, a diamond processing facility, we don't necessarily use chemicals. We use water. So there's nothing that is health hazardous that you find in that sludge or the mud in particular. So then we knew that at that time we can be able to rebuild the houses. Yeah. But the second other factor was...
Are you in disagreement, though, with the government around the hazardous material?
No. Remember, we never investigated or embarked on the toxicology report or rather the investigation. That was conducted by government as well as the Investor Free State. We are not expecting that area.
So they are the ones who came back with a report to say people can go back there, it's not hazardous. Let's bring in the mayor a little bit because I don't want you to continue too far. Mayor, let's welcome you and thank you very much for your time. There are a number of issues that remain, certainly. One is the fact that a year ago, a tailings dam built by a particular development company collapsed. And we brought in Parliament here. We spoke to them. They said part of the reason why it collapsed because of poor design and challenges in the construction, but also it was not maintained properly. They told the company at some point to stop draining into that particular dam because it is about to burst. But it seems their warning was not heeded, right? Now, has any accountability been taken on that score first before we come into the rebuilding?
Good evening to you, sir, and good evening to the viewers at home. I think first it is key that we start to say the collapse of the dam was mainly on the negligence part from the mining bosses, mainly because of the dam was not complying in terms of the laws of the country that governs, but in particular the DWS legislation that deals with the question of dams. But so far, we can safely say that immediately after the disaster occurred, the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation, Mr. Mahlobo, did accompany some of us to open a case that deals with the negligence issue from the mining bosses.
Yeah. So is that the degree of accountability? How far is that investigation in that case?
In the last interaction with us, with the Deputy Minister and provincial government, the Deputy Minister of Kokda, Mr. Pakstow, who is assigned by the Deputy President to assist the local leadership and the province on a team, we received a report that says the investigations are still ongoing, but we have not yet received as to how far are they in terms of the investigations. But the investigation is on progress.
Right. Now, in the meantime, there are about 160 houses or so that were damaged, a number of people that have been displaced. We are now engaged with the Jagersfontein development on that question, and they are saying the reason why 12 months on or so there's been really very little movement as far as reconstructing those houses. Part of it because of the limitations that have been put on them by government. One being the fact that government needed to provide an alternative land where the houses or new houses could be rebuilt. And that, of course, came with financial implications because the land that would have been identified did not have bulk services.
Yes, the part of the delay to respond to the disaster was mainly on the particular documents that were supposed to be furnished to us as the local leadership as well as the mining bosses. But what we can safely state is that the assessment reports took at least around 5 to 6 months in order to develop a strategy on how do we respond to the disaster. But it cannot only be regarded as part of a delay. We needed to do an assessment on the environment itself. We needed to do an assessment on the housing infrastructure itself. But safe to say that we have received all the reports and there is responses to the disaster. Although there are a little bit of other issues that I think we needed to deal with them as fast as we can. What we did as a municipality, we identified housing sites are in the town, which were at least having some bulk services connection. But in the main, we also identified a new area that can be developed into a new township. But that would have taken long because you need to register it as well as to include infrastructure, and it would have taken long. But when we saw the recovery on the environment and some areas where the disaster occurred, the government did come to us and say we need to respond to the disaster practically by allowing the mining bosses to rebuild some of the houses. Although there are positives that we can report as well as the negatives.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the negatives then. The report now that we started with indicating that, for example, there are sewage systems that have been damaged, and the municipality, the Kopanong municipality, your municipality, does not have money to fix that sewage system.
The municipality that we have inherited in 2021, of which we take full leadership to, is that it has been battling with financial resources for the past 10 years. And it's a municipality with 9 towns, inclusive of Jagersfontein. Before the disaster, we had issues in relation to bulk water services to our community, whereas there is a dispute between the municipality and Bloom Water, of which one can state that the relations are being attended to by the intervention of the national government. But the negatives that one can safely report is that when the disaster occurred, the first thing that we did was to advise the victims that they need to get assistance from the lawyers, and we received assistance from different law firms, which is Moroka attorneys, Richard Spoor attorneys, and Posa Lutz attorneys. So the victims, as they are divided in terms of the representation, and I think from our own opinion, it was a strategy utilized by the mining bosses to say they will be able to assist only those who come to them without lawyers. But if you have got a lawyer, your issues in relation to respond to the disaster will be delayed. But there is also
we'll speak to the legal representative. I want you to first address my issue of sewage systems damage, because this would work out to be another delay. That would say, okay, well, if we build there, where are we going to be building houses when there's sewage flowing all over?
Okay. No, I think on the sewage issue, one will not exaggerate it as it is exaggerated in other areas of conversation in relation to the disaster. We have an infrastructure of sewage plant. That was the first issue that was attended to. As we speak, the situation is better in terms of sewage spillages in the community, although there are issues that we need to attend to, but there are no sewage spillages in the community. But when we began to make an assessment after the disaster, there was a sewage spillage in the dam next to our community, of which the Department of Environmental Affairs and DWS did attend to it.
Yeah, so you're saying the Benchmarks Foundation, they got that particular part of their report wrong. So there's no sewage damage to that extent.
The Benchmark Foundation did come to us. I think it was around 3 weeks ago, of which we accompanied them to make assessment on the area, particularly the environment. We even went to the dam. They went and took tests to the lab, but we have not yet received the tests that they took to the lab. One cannot say they are wrong, because I think we are going to meet in the next week to get the results as to what is their study in relation to the water spillages in our community. But the report that we have from DWS is that the environment, the water, the sewage issues are being cleared and so on. But of course, there are different studies that are made from this point to the other.
Yeah. Mayor Xolani Tseletsele and Bilankulu Billy, who speaks for the Jagersfontein development. And we are talking a year on, the community still being helped to pick up the pieces, but quite slowly. And the benchmark report indicating that you've only offered 70 million rands as compensation. Is that enough? They believe it's not.
Look, I'm not sure where this information about figures and amounts of money comes from. And I think it's well ill-informed from this forum or researchers. Because when the disaster started, we announced that we are immediately availing 20 million. to assist with whatever cost that will rise from the disaster. And that 20 million at the beginning was to mainly focus on the medical expenses as well as accommodation for people. But adhering and following the directives, there were a lot of work that needed to be done, including the environmental rehabilitation, including employing a professional approved person, including engineering work. There was a lot of work that needs to be done. So there's no budget that has been allocated with limitations, so to say, to address the issue of the disaster.
So they do acknowledge the 20 million, certainly, but they're saying up until then there's been, I suppose, another 50 million or so that has been added. And so the amount that has been spent, it's in the figure of about 70 million.
No. We have so far spent over 120 million.
120 million is this?
That is what we've spent. Yeah. But that is not money that we had initially budgeted.
Okay.
Nor did we sit and say, this is all the money we have. Right. We don't have a budget for a disaster response. We respond to the needs of whatever the disaster requires. This 120 million that I'm referring to does not even speak to the housing. Okay. So as you can imagine, we are sitting also in a position where we are saying we are law-abiding citizens. And as long as the law requires us to respond to the disaster, we'll continue to do so. Yeah. And that has not been limited to any amount of money.
Let's talk then to this issue that the mayor is raising, but the issue that Richard Sport Attorneys is also raising, to say the very same company that is responsible for the disaster is now going behind them, wanting to negotiate with the homeowners outside of the protection of their legal counsel.
Who is them? Because in our response to the disaster, we needed to focus on the primary affected people, not attorneys, not even government, the victims themselves. And by all rights, we had to engage with the victims. And we told the victims, we spoke to the victims to say, we are establishing an office that deals directly with yourselves on your issues that affect you directly. And this does not deprive you from your legal or litigation rights. By all rights, you can do that. But that was creating an opportunity.
So you're not getting them to sign contracts that say they forego all other claims when you build them these new houses?
No. We are saying to the victims, we are willing to respond to their claims. And when you claim, you provide us with everything that you're claiming for. Once we have settled your claim, we don't expect you to come back again and want to claim any other thing. That for now, when you come to us and say, I have lost this bottle of water, I want you to pay me. We don't expect you to come tomorrow and say, no, this bottle of water was worth more than what I've initially settled. That's all we're saying. So, and in our engagement with the community, also with government, was to say, let's prioritize the issue of building the houses. Because for us, having people back in their homes would give us some form of, would also give the people some form of hope. And rehabilitation of their own life, or rebuilding of their own livelihood. So when any other person comes to us with litigation intentions, we therefore, by all rights, have to refer them to our legal department or our attorneys, because in our level, we are not litigators, we're not legal experts. So we need to refer them to people that are merely learned like them. Then they can engage with each other on their learned level. So that is all we're doing. We're not refusing to engage with any person, be it the municipality, who also are in litigation as well for other issues. But we continue engaging with them on issues that doesn't relate to their attorneys. But when you come with your litigation, you must then speak directly to the people that represent us in the level of litigation.
Fortunately, I'm completely out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll bring you back again at another stage as this matter advances. Mayor, let me appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming.